everybody, it's Kelly Folsom here, and welcome back to another Vital Art session. Today we are going to be studying how to paint sunflowers. So again, one of my favorite flowers and totally different from painting a peony or rose. So let's get started. Hey, hello everyone. We are going to be painting these beautiful sunflowers today. And again, I have gone ahead and pre-mixed up some colors just to sort of get us going. As I discussed in the peonies video, the sunflower is much more concave. So this one facing right at us, and it has a very large center which is deep inside, and then all of these petals are kind of shooting out directly at us. But light is maybe passing through them on this side, but underneath here, these petals here maybe are laying more flat to the light, so those would be getting more light. This sunflower over here, this whole left-hand side, is getting more surface light, and then the inside is more in shadow here. So if you can see that, you know, it's a little bit more sort of a conical, cone-like shape here in this position, with this one being more front on. So it's kind of nice if you're doing sunflowers to try to get them at different angles. I kind of always like to have one sort of back here that I'm seeing some of the green of the stem, and then all these petals are pretty much in light here, and you know, they kind of do that fanning out motion from the center axis there from the green. So I've pre-mixed up, since most of my colors are going to be I've already got my purest yellow out, and then I've got sort of a cad yellow deep here for you know, this yellow orange. So I've kind of or really that's more orange, so I've kind of mixed those two together to get more of a yellow orange. I've started by mixing up just a batch of green here that can either go more muted, so a batch of green, a yellow green that can go either darker or add more yellow to go lighter, and you could pre-mix, you know, as many colors as you want to see. I knew that since these are yellow and I do have green in here, I wanted to maybe push more blue into the background or into the black vase. Another thing I mixed up here is kind of a reddish violet, a darker reddish violet, because I was thinking, you know, it would be more pleasing, I think, to the eye, let's say in this dark neutral inside, if we have something that has more of a color to it. It can still be, of course, more neutral in saturation than the yellows, but maybe something that just has a little bit more rich color saturation to it than just, say, burnt umber or just black, if that makes sense. All right. So again, doing a little bit of preliminary thinking and work can help you to be able to paint a little more efficiently and perhaps not get so lost throughout the painting process. So I'm going to start right away by just taking that blue and black together, and let's get just a really rich color blocked in. Again, I've just got simple shapes. I'm trying to see how I can connect the shapes and get the proportions right away before I start. And once more, we're going to try to keep practicing our, you know, laying on the paint with more vitality, making the most out of our brush strokes, one stroke at a time, and trying not to overblend things. Okay. So, and then perhaps around the highlight, let's do a little more blue, perhaps, there on top, and can do a little touch of stronger highlight there. Might be nice to have a little bit of yellow eventually show up in this. Let's just try that. So I also put out the blue because I was thinking, well, the blue sort of desaturates the orange tones, and that will also give me sort of a complementary color play as well, which is always nice. So, okay. And then what I might do for that background color is kind of do a little bit of this blue, a little more green into this blue and some white. Lots of medium. Let's go ahead and get something washed in here. That can always be adjusted later on, but it's kind of nice to have something a little more solid back there. And I did paint in with tone with red oxide and some blue. This time I got a little more blue in it, so that's why it's a little more neutral of a color. And if this is starting to feel too colorful for you, and that just kind of depends on the person, but you can definitely, knock it down. You can use black, you can use, again, that complementary color to desaturate. I do want the yellow perhaps to be the strongest color, the warms in the yellow orange, so I might just desaturate some of that blue. And don't be too concerned about losing an edge like that. That's pretty easy to come back and just reinforce that edge with a new paint stroke. Okay. Oops. So just getting some of that laid in. And next, because I always do my darks and my background first before I start putting on a lot of the lights, the next thing when it comes to the flowers would be the inside of that flower. And I've already got this really nice color pre-mixed. And, it doesn't have to be all solid one color, so maybe you can neutralize it a little bit more. But I want to kind of compare it right to the black vase. How close in value is that? Is there more color? And there is more color in the inside, a little more of the reds and the violets on the inside of those sunflowers. I see just a small weird little abstract shape of the inside of this, and some of that will probably get covered up later on with some overlapping petals. But again, I'm just going through looking for all of those dark shapes, shadows on this green foliage here. Just trying to simplify the mass or simplify the shapes that can always get a little more clarified later on. So some of these do go a little bit lighter and warmer up towards the top. And I think it's kind of a good idea to kind of pull some of this down because you don't want little outlines. So maybe just go ahead and pull some of that background color down, to carve the shapes down smaller, and it kind of starts to eat up some of that contour, that silhouette. But again, this is just sort of a preventative measure for me that I'm taking so that, number one, I don't end up with any of these odd little outline things happening, trying to work perfectly around the shapes. And number two, kind of helps me maintain the size of my flowers as I'm going along here. All right, then I want to start looking for trying to simplify big masses on the flowers. Excuse me. Because if you stare for too long, you'll start to perhaps see too many separated petals, So this is kind of where, you know, your squinting can come in, or just painting quicker and just going, okay, I just want to start with the simplest shape here. So this beautiful reddish orange that I made with the red oxide and some cadmium yellow deep to get sort of that glowy shadow color on the inside of that. And then I'm going to, since I just covered that up, I'm going to try to bring back a little piece of that darker shape that we're seeing in there. And then that same type of color, except for, you know, maybe a little bit lighter, the red oxide for this underneath. And I kind of want to, again, kind of fuse it with the centerpiece here, that darker centerpiece, so that, and just with the light touch kind of softening into one another, so that, again, it doesn't look too cut out or too harsh right there. And if you need to adjust the drawing or bring an edge back a little clearer, you know, then remix up that color, or if you still have that color down, you know, kind of reinforce that edge again. So, and then again, these greens and blues are going to come in real nicely to desaturate some of this yellow orange. Or, you know, let's say some of these down here that are more in shadow. You can even use some of the reddish orange. So these petals down here are moving away from the light, and they're not quite as intense of a color. Their local color gets a little bit muted down here rather than, say, up here where it's closest to the light. So that's where you can start to use some of that, anything in the greens or blues, really, to neutralize. Some of that shows up in here too. So not only do I work dark to light, but before I put on those high intensity lights, I also kind of get in a lot of my neutral tones that I'm seeing, because it's really some of those neutrals that I think make it look more realistic and not too false looking, because if you use too pure of color all over, then it might just start looking a little cartoony. So just kind of building in the darks first, and then also building in some of the neutrals, because some of these under, you have to think about the fact that there are several layers of petals here, and the underneath petals, maybe you have, let's say, 3 rows of petals, and the underneath petals are getting less light, so they're a little bit more muted in their color. Then say petals that are on top, or that are getting a little more reflected light or surface light. So I can gradually start to build up, you know, a little bit lighter and warmer and purer in color eventually here. So especially this one, most of what you're seeing on this one is light passing through the petals, or cast shadows. So it'll make sense here in a moment whenever I start to put on the stronger lights. And I don't want to forget the green here of this flower. So dipping into my green, maybe back into the purple to, again, kind of mute that or get it darker, using a sharper edge here where I see a piece of, I don't know what that is supposed to be called, but anyways, the green part before the flower, I guess it's a part of the stem, really. Okay. Alrighty. So as of yet, we really haven't turned on the lights, so to speak, in this painting. So besides the highlights, so right now everything may feel like a little bit dingy or something, like, because everything's in the middle tone. All right, so we're going to start getting on some lights. So a lot more of this yellow to begin with, and I'll hold off on my white for now with this cadmium lemon, grabbing some of that cad yellow deep that I already mixed up. And you know, one of my brightest ones, let's say, is here. So you can start to see just how much that really grabs the eye. And you know, kind of play around with your brush. You know, you don't always have to work in the same direction of brush stroke, and you know, sunflowers have a little bit more texture, a little bit more of that nitty-gritty type feeling, if you will. So you can kind of build up a little more texture if you wish. And then there are a few pieces on this side that kind of curl back and catch the light a little bit more. And play around with how many different ways you can use your brush. Can you use it on the side to make a skinnier stroke? How can you maybe curl your brush stroke versus, say, rather maybe paint it flat? Because in some areas, yeah, you want it kind of smoother and flatter to some degree, and in other areas you want more sort of expressive or lyrical brush work. And as we've talked about, a lot of times that type of brush work is often found in the lights. It can also describe the texture of something, which is what we're attempting to do here. And, you know, using a more lyrical stroke can also help to bring in a lot of rhythm and movement into the painting. All right, so starting with that one, and then unfortunately I've got a little bit of green on that. And then this one here is a really beautiful, big, clean piece of light on this side. And then, of course, starts to diminish again as we move back towards the shadow and away from that light source. But the most amount of clean, brilliant light would be here on the start. And then I'm actually trying to use my brush strokes to say, okay, here, this one's getting skinnier, these are fuller, closer to my eye level. Got some underneath petals that are a little bit darker there. And then lighter layers on top. I'm trying not to put white in this color because this yellow is already such a nice, brilliant color, and it's a light value already, so. And it's a cooler yellow, so it'll help intimate that cooler light source. So if you start putting too much white into it, you're also going to sort of kill the chromatic nature of that color. And that's part of what makes, I think, sunflowers look like sunflowers. And then always, as these petals are moving away from the center, they're not going to be as lit up as over here, but remember, you're going to get some little tips of light, you know, small little amounts of light here as they start to creep away from that dark center. And And since those are more on the shadow side, you could use a soft hair brush if you wish to just get rid of any glaring brush strokes, glare that's actually from the brush. And I see one little petal here that's kind of sticking out from the bunch, catching that last little bit of light on that side. The whole time just trying to think, well, how can I make a different type of brush stroke that might create some visual interest. And sometimes, sometimes you hit the nail on the head and sometimes you don't. And so you might kind of scrape it or move it off or try again, but all right. So then coming over here, there are some petals on this front one, especially here. So what happens is, because this is like a bowl, these petals are actually bending over the center part. So, and then these petals are cupping up around, because everything is circling over. And so what happens is that these petals down here really become more in light than the ones on top. So I will start building more light there. And I think you want to watch out having too many hard edges on the inside. And these are kind of some wild woolly sunflowers here, so I want to try to express that if I can, the fact that these are not that they're more organically shaped and they're not perfect all the way around. So I think with nature, you're kind of looking for the order, but also how nature does deviate from that order as well. Now, and then there's going to be some skinnier pieces up here that catch the light too. Oh, I just lost a petal. And then keeping in mind that these petals, because of foreshortening, since this sunflower is totally head on, these petals are going to be shorter and these petals are going to be longer, just because of their angle. So again, you want to notice that, you want to pay attention to that and observe that, because if you don't, then you'll start to get the perspective just won't feel natural. So just take a look and double check that you're not making all the petals the same length perfectly around, because what you'll end up with if you do that is, it looks very, just looks very amateur, like perhaps like whenever a child does creates a sun and all the sun rays are perfectly symmetrical all the way around. It's just kind of something naturally, we're trying to simplify it and bring order to it. But that ends up, again, just kind of not looking too natural. I'm going to just pull some of that paint off to get a little transparency there. And then I'm just going to have the skinniest little tips. You could do this with a brush, you could do it with palette knife, but but these petals are all kind of facing the shadow side. They're on the shadow side, so light is passing through them, but it's not light is sitting on top or resting on top of them, so to speak. So again, knowing your direction of light source and how that's affecting the object. And then of course the texture of that object, as we've talked about, you know, flowers are, their leaves or petals are slightly translucent, so they get a lot of light passing through them depending on the angle. A few little hints of those on the inside, a few little tips. This one's kind of curling up. So, you know, and obviously you guys have some more time than me. You can study these flowers longer, and but so try to understand just the general sense of how do these sunflowers work? How are they designed? How is the light interacting with them? And I think if you get that understanding, you don't have to exactly copy or render every single petal perfectly. You know, what always helps these things too is coming back in with whatever color is around, because the filbert kind of makes a rounded edge. So you can kind of come back in with, say, the color of the vase or background and kind of create that, carve into that to get that pointy edge on some of the flowers, petals. Especially the one that is in front. You want more clarity on the edges in the drawing there. More focus, let's say. Highlight, or not highlight, but reflected light, as you can see in this shiny black vase, shows up on the back end. So where the part of the form is turning back around to face the light hitting the background, that's where you would get some reflected light in there. And that's, you know, I think really important to creating more form and just a stronger sense of light. So the darker part of the shadow is actually on the interior, you know, where the shadow begins. All right. So sometimes too, what I like to do is just kind of take all these colors, mix them all together. Say if I'm looking for a tabletop color, or just some color variety or some neutrals. What I might do is take, you know, kind of mix all these colors together. You know, again, instead of just copying that same wood tabletop every time, I need to kind of raise this up, this table edge. Then by kind of mixing all those colors together, I get a nice neutral that's harmonious with everything. And again, I've got cool light hitting on a warm tabletop, so it might be nice to come back in and hit that with a little bluer or blue-green mixture, even violet, you know, something with some cooler tones in it. Generally, what I like to do also is which I didn't do. I'll put a petal up there for you guys, but generally I like to put some petals, you know, maybe some fallen petals and maybe some reflected light from one of those fallen angels, no, fallen heroes of a petal down here. And don't forget to anchor it with a little bit of cast shadow is nice, so it doesn't just look like it's floating there in midair. Or you could do that too. Some people, artists have been doing that lately. It's interesting. Floating objects. Not my bag, but you know, whatever floats your boat. I also see a little pinch of green on the inside. Again, I can add a little bit more detail on this particular sunflower, the one in the center. Okay guys, happy painting. Thank you for watching.